All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. It looks like we've got a great group today, great cross-section across industry. So again, welcome to Talent, Technology, and Transformation, Microsoft's direct sourcing story. For those who don't know me, I'm Justin Lumby, president at TalentNet. For those unfamiliar with TalentNet, we're the AI-powered enterprise direct sourcing platform that enables branded talent communities and engagement experiences, helping many of the world's most recognizable brands directly attract and engage their contingent workforce. I'm privileged today to be joined by our customer, Crystal Price from Microsoft, and our partner, Christen Caine from Allegis Global Solutions. Before we get started, would love to get some introductions. Crystal and Christen, welcome. Would you please introduce yourselves and your roles? Crystal, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Justin, for having us. We're really excited to be here today. I'm Crystal Price. I am part of Microsoft's procurement organization, where my responsibility is to oversee on our team the direct sourcing program as part of our contractor services staff augmentation program. I cover the EMEA region. I oversee 16 countries, and I've been at Microsoft for about 4 years. So I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Awesome. Christen, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. I'm Christen Caine. I'm a program executive with Allegis Global Solutions, dedicated to the Microsoft Contractor Services Program, and I'm responsible for our North America client delivery team, as well as partnering with Crystal here on our direct sourcing channel.
Great. I'm really excited about today's session, guys. We're talking about the evolution of direct sourcing at Microsoft. And Microsoft's really become true thought leaders and innovators in the space, I think, true to the sort of DNA of Microsoft. These discussions all often focus on direct sourcing fundamentals. So laying the foundation for a direct sourcing program, some of those basics. And today we're going to go further. While we're going to touch on the origins of direct sourcing at Microsoft and how the program was set up, we're really going to focus on Microsoft moving from what they refer to as Gen 1 to Gen 3 direct sourcing, and what we often refer to as crawl, walk, run approach. So just in terms of timing here, the session is going to last around 45 minutes. We'll have perspectives from all sides on a number of questions. For the audience, feel free to submit questions along the way. We're broadcasting both on LinkedIn Live. There's a comment and question section there. You can submit questions. And we're also broadcasting on Zoom, which you can submit questions to as well. Towards the end, we'll answer as many of those questions as we can. So without further ado, why don't we kick off? Let's start with sort of the origin story at Microsoft in terms of direct sourcing. So Crystal, over to you first. What opportunities in contingent hiring prompted Microsoft to explore direct sourcing in the first place?
So I'd say with my background, like I come from a place of awareness. Before joining Microsoft, I was in the MSP space. Before that, I was in the recruitment space. So, I've heard the value prop of direct sourcing. I've seen it in action. I've implemented it myself in the past. So really, we understood that there was brand opportunity and brand potential that was out there that's proven, and we were just missing out on it. So, anyone that's entertaining direct sourcing, and joining, getting into this space, you already have a brand that's proven, it's known to drive engagement. Our brand is known to do the same thing. So, we were just clearly missing out on maximizing, the full potential in the contingent space. And then for our referral channels, I mean, we have a lot of known talent, whether it's previous workers from our alumni network or previous contractors or just people that are in general interested in sending us candidates that are qualified to join Microsoft. And there was just no place for them, right? And so we know the value of our brand, we know the value of our referral channels. And then we've seen, and like we all have, right, during COVID, during some of these other events that are going on, is there's talent fluctuations, whether it's up or down. Being able to scale quickly is key. And we just didn't have visibility into our own talent pools to be able to leverage that at ease. And so it was just making sure, we had that competitive advantage, that we were able to, continue attracting talent through all available channels and not just our existing supply base.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it sounds like a very proactive approach and a pragmatic approach with a lot of sort of early planning that went into it. And really a recognition of, long-term shifts in the engagement of contingent workforce changing, recognizing, brand equity and how that can be leveraged. moving on, how did you define goals and the vision for the original direct sourcing program?
Yeah, so for me, with my past life, having launched direct sourcing, I've seen it done a couple different ways. Without the brand, without a platform, working with more than one curation partner. So it was really good to come from a perspective where I had seen what did and didn't work. So that when we were building our design out, we wanted to make sure that we had all the buy-in that we needed in the upfront as part of our go forward strategy. So we wanted a program that would stand out, right? Be scalable in a thoughtful way where, all these infrastructures were in place for us to have the ability to pull additional levers as we moved forward. So there were non-negotiables as far as our go and no go for our project. We had to have our brand. We had to have a platform provider. We had to be able to, show impact within the first 6 months, see continued growth. So all of these foundational elements were part of our design as we put our vision in place. And so I would say we were pretty, rigid early on with, making sure that everything was measurable, outcome based. We had a lot of established rules of engagement in the early on before execution to make sure that we knew exactly how the program would work with our MSP partner and our curation partner and our supply base. And make sure that we also included exclusivity in our roles, which I'll talk more about in a little bit here. And having that exclusive period was key. So very structured, very aligned with, having that vision for what we wanted it to be moving forward.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about sort of what that resulted in later on and sort of the positive results that came from that. But yeah, certainly a very structured, a structured approach focusing on measurable goals, governance. You define guardrails early on, as you said, sort of limiting the scope of the program, which ultimately sort of set the stage for sustained success. So what were the early hurdles potentially with leadership buy-in, adoption?
Our program and to launch it, some people start with HR, some people start with procurement. We started with legal because we knew that was going to be our biggest hurdle to get the program moving. So, a recurring concern that we heard here that I'm sure others have heard as well is like, what's the co-employment risk? You're using our brand, you're taking it to market, you're attracting talent. What does that look like? And so we had a lot of early on like education and knowledge sharing, white papers that you all provided us on the topics just to discuss how we would engage these workers and what the role of our curation partner would be. So that was really key for us early on. And then from there with legal, we brought in branding and global talent acquisition. So to further that conversation, to really build that foundation. So, once we landed on everything from what the program would look like, what the language would be that we'd be putting out there, how we would position our curation partner in our job postings, like literally word by word, what does our website, paragraphs look like that introduces direct sourcing as far as our talent community. So once we got that locked in, it started going pretty fast. We continued conversations with my leadership. We had our story locked in by that point, right? Like we had GTA on board, we had legal on board, branding on board. So really it was just sharing our go forward plan at that point. And, a lot of the feedback was pretty enthusiastic of, why haven't we done this sooner? And it's like, well, it was a pretty long journey to get here, years in the making to get to that point. So then we start talking about like adoption of the program. So our story was a little bit different than others. So with our contractor services program, which is what we call our MSP or our contingent workforce program, it's been in place for about 15 years now. And it had strong results, a great story to tell. We had amazing time to fill, time savings to the business. We did a study to show, we were saving the business 11 hours per engagement. Our compliance was in place, our satisfaction scores were high. And so a year prior to us launching the direct sourcing, we actually received leadership buy-in to mandate our program. So from a staff augmentation policy, which is no small feat. So we had a great foundation. So once we had that program mandate in place, it really put us on solid ground where direct sourcing was more seamless. It was baked into our sourcing processes. It was baked into how the MSP worked with our engagement model. So we didn't really need to consider direct sourcing as an adoption strategy. Once it was on, we just applied it and started executing against our goals.
There was a lot there, a lot of I
Yes.
think really
Yes.
sound, a lot of really sound advice. But I think you mentioned the stakeholder alignment and early engagement, and I think that's critical. Again, a lot of early work and planning going into this. But again, I think serving the foundation and really what's led to success later on. I love the idea of feedback loops, having that
Yeah.
alignment internally, and then sort of the objective focus on what are the goals, how are they measured. You already sort of had that framework in place for
Mhm.
KPIs, goals, and you're able to sort of layer on that with direct sourcing and really then objectively determine sort of what the value is. So that's great advice. Christen, why don't we move over to you? So just from a curation perspective, with AGS, what opportunities did you see in building out the program and program strategy at Microsoft, working with Crystal and the team?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with Crystal on gaining executive sponsorship. There was just naturally opportunity in that we had that enthusiastic support. So they also very easily saw the opportunity. So it gave us that great foundation to work off of. On top of that, there was opportunity just in the volume of requests that were already coming through our program. So that with the Microsoft brand in hand, we were able to leverage that strength in the brand to build a strong, engaged talent community. And by building that talent community around the brand, we've been able to just create this pipeline of skilled, engaged candidates who are passionate really specifically about working for Microsoft.
Right. So, really focusing early on how do you activate the brand,
Mhm.
with Microsoft, right? And then how is that leveraged, at the I guess the intersection, obviously, of AGS's operations, and
Mhm.
again, leveraging Microsoft's brand, which obviously is very well now known in the world, very powerful. So, that's great. Kristen, how did you bring the initial strategy to life operationally?
Yeah, so we really had some good program data to use. So we used that program data to create our approach. We identified what we saw was the highest volume, repeatable skill sets early on that we said, okay, here's our starting point. We can use this to create a strong talent community and make quick impact, right? To start showing those results very quickly. And then, of course, tools and technology were critical in our setup. So refining as we went, but doing some good testing up front, and then ensuring that we're tapping into automation wherever possible. So using the features that support the build of the talent community, but then the management of that talent community and the ongoing engagement of the talent community, which becomes more and more important as it grows larger. Another piece of bringing strategy to life really is team build. So we have a direct sourcing delivery team. Some of you might know it as the curation team, or maybe the recruitment team resonates a little better, but it's really the team that supports the build and engagement of the talent community for Microsoft. So the team leverages their recruitment capability, which is strong, and then engages and curates that growing talent pool. So it's been very important for us to have connectivity throughout all of our teams. So the direct sourcing delivery team, the program office, the TalentNet team, and then our client stakeholders. And that will continue to be more and more important as we all embrace kind of change moving forward.
It's the the ever-ending semantical debate about curator versus recruiter and what are we going to go with. I'm not sure that will ever be resolved. I'll just chime in from a TalentNet perspective as well. So it's working with Crystal and the team at Microsoft and with Kristen, and this early strategy is coming together, and these objectives. It's really our role to ensure that as we're designing and implementing the platform and the system that's going to go in place to support all of this, that again, there's this, as Crystal mentioned, there's this feedback loop amongst the partners as well, and with our customer Microsoft, and that ultimately, the needs and requirements are being met in the platform to allow for that future scale, as we're going to get to as well. I just as well, Kristen, want to emphasize what you said about, I think, being pragmatic about the operational build. So we're often asked, should direct sourcing be used in this labor segment or that labor segment, or this region or that region? And I think more importantly, what you said is really focusing on specific roles and where you could have repeatable success and results, And not that that's where the scope of direct sourcing would stop, but that's really where you began, because you then build on that sort of foundation of success, and then amplify those results, as we'll see later, into new skill sets, regions, etc. So we're going to move on sort of to topic 2 now, but I think for the audience here, just sort of, wrapping this first piece up, sort of those early days, and the importance of establishing sort of the framework for direct sourcing, the strategy around it. Crystal talked a lot about aligning stakeholders and how important that is, and really getting buy-in internally, getting your ducks in a row, so to speak. And then I think the feedback loop, again, between TalentNet, AGS, and Microsoft here, that we're all on the same page, that we're working collectively towards the same shared goals and objectives. So why don't we move on to early program design and execution, so how the program was structured and then launched into operation. So Crystal, back to you. How was the original program structured? For example, Christen touched on titles, categories, etc., that were in scope. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of titles, categories, and timelines of that original program?
Yeah, and I will be mirroring a lot of what Christen said. So yeah, I mean, we use the direct sourcing playbook, right? Start slow, be conservative as far as we were concerned, with how we initially approached the program. So it was very few labor categories. I mean, they were highly repeatable job titles, which for us, that is up for debate because most of our titles are very repeatable. But we wanted to give them that time to grow their talent pools, right? Like we understood initially that as we were growing, there would be some heavy reliance early on pure recruitment, right, versus curation. So as we grew our talent pools, then being able to slowly shift organically into that talent pool curation, we were able to say, now we've got, this skill set, we've got, 50 plus, 100 plus, whatever that looks like, ready to go, fully engaged in our curation pool, so that we would make that transition from going out to market and recruiting to being able to use those pools, because that's where we're sending our candidates. And so we were still purposefully exposing a variety of requisitions to our TalentNet portal, and allowing that team to participate outside of our exclusive roles to orient themselves. So, we're a large enterprise. We have a lot of complexities, a lot of nuances from one team to another. So, with any supplier that we bring on, we've got to give them time to ramp. So, that exclusivity as far as being built in was key. We knew the benefit of that early on. And so we wanted to make sure we struck that fine balance between which roles had exclusivity, which roles didn't have exclusivity, so they could really focus and become great in certain skill sets, but still keep their finger on the pulse, still keep engaging and learning more about some of those positions that weren't exclusive, or they had direct competition with our supply base early on. And so with that benefit, it was key to them getting their footing, right, and give them that space to be successful. Start pushing enough candidates through our pipeline to get that solid feedback loop. I mean, Kristen's team, the MSP, like they are a gold mine of just feedback on, what the candidate looks like, what the hiring manager needs, or we call them sponsors here, but and then also getting that hiring manager feedback and being able to make sure that there was always growth and understanding as that team ramped up. So that was a lot of our design and our strategy, was be able to have that exclusivity built in our first stage to make sure that we had those controls in place while still having flexibility to grow.
I think you touched on an important point around the talent pool itself. And, we're often sort of asked, like, is the talent pool sort of, self-fulfilling and self-evolving? Does it need to be fed? And I think the answer is really a combination of both, right? You're building up out sort of a talent asset, if you will, over time. And there's, ROI that evolves and grows as that talent pool continues to evolve and grow. But at the same time, it's really a living, breathing thing, right? So you've got sort of your talent pool, the incumbent talent pool, but of course it needs to be fed constantly, so to speak, as well. Both so you have fresh talent coming in, new skill sets, but also so that the overall talent pool is sort of growing in value, and that talent asset can be tapped into more. You touched, Crystal, on feedback loops and how that sort of benefited early decisions. So how did leadership's feedback loops influence some of those early decisions?
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky. I mean, we had very enthusiastic leaders early on, like once they saw the value of the program. So, you got to think early on, we're planning that, laying the seeds, we go off, we go implement, we take, 12 weeks, and then we come back and oh, by the way, now we're launching. And so we made sure that we were sharing often so that they didn't lose that momentum or that enthusiasm. So, being very intentional by design, doing our quarterly business reviews, giving the team 10 minutes to talk about, what's happening, annual business reviews, getting that full summary of, where we've gone from, over the past 4 quarters. If we had strategic meetings, we do a showcase, the roadmap. So we were always giving that feedback and making sure we had visibility so that no one would lose their buy-in in the program, which has been great. But our forecasts were exceeded, and we were able to show that trending to our leaders. And their feedback was, okay, great, how can we go faster? How can we continue to evolve? Like, let's take all the guardrails off. And we're like, whoa, we got to still be a little methodical about this. But definitely their feedback was to keep making improvements, keep expanding, keep looking for efficiencies in the program, and just be mindful of those things as always, and just to go forward.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're borrowing from like agile product development and some of those concepts as you're going through it, right? But again, not just sort of dropping a product or a solution on someone's lap and saying, here it is, and use it. But again, that it's a very it's an engaged process, a lot of feedback along the way, and the benefits you're gaining buy-in as you're also sort of getting getting influence and contribution. Christen, over to you. How did AGS structure and manage talent pools initially?
Yeah, so within the talent community, I referenced that we started with those high volume, repeatable skill sets. So we really structured specific talent pools by segmenting candidates based on their skill sets, job titles, locations. And really over time, we were able to further develop those. So adding specific experiences or specific customer requests that we saw come up repetitively. We've also partnered with trusted community. Ability to come into that talent community. I know a lot of customers feel this way, but especially at Microsoft, there is a strong desire of community for previous Microsoft experience. So that's been a big channel for us.
And what were some of the early lessons learned in scaling and engagement around the talent pool?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit, but learning an enterprise program is not easy. So having those close partnerships across all of the teams involved, it's a requirement for success. So starting with a laser focus and resisting the urge to activate everything all at once, I think that could lead to some inefficiencies and dampen those early results that are important, especially up front, starting with a new program. And then you mentioned kind of that agile workflow. So I think building a flexible framework that can adapt to the evolving needs of our customers, having those agile workflows that allow us to collaborate, to incorporate the feedback, and really respond to those changing requirements.
Yeah, and certainly that's reflected as well from a TalentNet perspective in platform implementation. We need to be listening and hearing Microsoft and their goals, as well as AGS. And then again, understanding not just where we're sort of beginning and starting, but where we plan to go with this, right? And that we're set up for scale, we're set up for performance, whether that's expanding across skill sets and or geographies and regions. So I think just a few sort of takeaways from the last few minutes around establishing a foundation, a lot of pragmatic approach in implementing the solution, creating clear program goals and KPIs around that. Again, not to kind of keep repeating the same point, but the alignment that was in place with stakeholders, and again that constant feedback loop that sort of led to agility, but also sort of contribution from multiple parties, and again, not just dictating sort of what the solution is to them. So why don't we move on, sort of evolving to Gen 2, so sort of getting out of the foundation, getting out of the basics, and sort of starting to focus on where we're taking this. So when we think of Gen 2, we really think about, you've got a direct sourcing program in place, you've got some early success, you've got alignment and buy-in from the business. There's obviously an external talent experience that now job seekers are becoming aware of. but now it's time to grow and scale. We want to think about optimization, about performance, about scaling, again, whether that's across skill sets, geographies, et cetera, and doing all of that to the extent we can using a data-driven approach. So Crystal, over to you. How did program goals and objectives evolve since those early days, since launch?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was really just looking across all of our metrics and just looking for areas that we could improve upon or make tweaks or make updates as far as our overall goal. Like our goal pretty much stayed the same, right? Like how do we continue to be best in class? How do we continue to grow? But we looked at everything from our contractor satisfaction scores, how do we get that 0.25 increase? What happens next there? Some of the levers that we pulled to update our goals and our objectives were, maybe we don't have such tight controls over our exclusivity period or which recs are exclusive. And so putting some of the power into the curation team's hands to say, hey, you can take a look at, what our talent pools look like and how do we decide, where there's enough available talent to build a full slate to bypass some of our other solutions as far as sourcing is concerned. So we fully, updated like our caps on our job titles, that exclusivity, and then started using our data to rebuild our framework. So it was more of a, if this, what are our expectations? And then building those goals to match those expectations. And so Chris and the team can speak to like the fluidity that we kept in mind once we had our foundation in place. And so as we started to, pull some of those levers and say, okay, well, great. Now we've got more exclusivity. That means we're going to have more headcount. What does that savings goal look like now? What is our time to source going to look like? And just understanding what the scope we were building would look like over time helped to drive some of those changes and evolutions and what some of our goals were. So really it was just us being, let's be more aggressive. Let's up our percentages on everything. Let's move the goalpost so that we can have those higher expectations of, not only, Microsoft setting it for, like growing our talent pools, but with our curation partner and having conversations that, they weren't difficult conversations, but they were definitely conversations that said, how do we get there? What's your opinion? Give us your feedback, and then having that loop between all of our partners. And when it came to building out like what's next, luckily we have people like TalentNet and Allegis in place where we can say, well, what are others doing? How do we leverage what they're doing and build some of those things into our program? And so when we looked at like, our innovation or like what's next, it's, one of our main focuses is, how do we continue to delight our candidates and our contractors? So Kristen's talking about engaged, candidate pools in our populations, but, without them, we're not going to be successful. So what does that look like? And how do we make sure that we keep, pushing where it makes sense while still keeping our overall goal in mind?
Yeah, so certainly not a set it and forget it approach, but really a focus on iteration. And you were talking earlier about sort of that early program design, and to some extent, some of that's done with hypothesis, right? You're thinking about what what you've learned, what you know about the organization, your goals, and you're kind of putting an early program in place. But now it sounds like you have the benefit of data, right? You have early data, early results, and from that, you can use that to sort of turn dials, optimize. So that's I think it's back to that sort of agile approach here. So how did you plan and build the post go live roadmap moving forward?
Yeah, a lot of iterations with our partners. So I mean, TalentNet, you guys came to the table, so did Allegis, just to really start to understand, like I said, what others have done and how we could incorporate it. You guys put forth a really nice crawl, walk, run structure, and we're looking at it going, yeah, we can do these things. So when we talked about, getting into that run state, that ideal state, it was just looking at like what gaps did we have. So we would have conversations about, fulfillment versus cost savings initiatives and making sure that we had the right structure in place so that we could start, increasing our fulfillment and not just focusing on what, cost savings, looked like, but just having that constant feedback loop, and then looking at the data from those different lenses, from the MSP saying like, hey, this is what our scorecarding perspective tells us compared to the other suppliers within our program and within other programs, or with, with TalentNet, you guys saying, look, well, this is what we're seeing from our customer talent pools and how they're leveraging it and what their strategies are. And even our curation partner, hearing like what's happening within the industry, what others are doing to continue to, grow their happy and content, candidate pools. And so we've continued to have that 360 review as we keep going. And we've done a couple things to set ourselves up for success, which has been great. So part of our build out and our plan for that post go live roadmap was incorporating AI. How do we put the right channels in place to get that enabled? We have a robust, responsible AI process that we go through, or how do we get our alumni on board? What does that look like? What are the additional restrictions that we currently have on the program? What if we move those? What does that look like? So kind of what you were saying with those hypotheses of, one, these are the things that we need to do, and then these are the things that we're thinking about doing, and what does that look like? And then being able to hold ourselves accountable with, our estimated outcomes, and then being able to look back and say, yeah, we met that goal. Great, let's keep going. Or, hey, we haven't met that goal yet. What else should we be restructuring?
I think you made a really good point, Crystal, just around sort of influence and where you gather it from. And, there's obviously like, internal stakeholders and partners that you have that, you're collaborating with. But you mentioned as well, sort of almost network effects by going out into the market and looking at what are other enterprises doing. And I think that's a great point because, the maturity of direct sourcing now, it's much different than it was, 5 or 8 years ago. There's a lot of very notable companies that are pretty mature now in this process, and there's a lot of good advice out there that can be benefited from in terms of what are you doing and can I leverage this as well. So I think that's sound advice. So why don't we get sort of a bit visionary here? What is next? What's next in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, sure. And it's funny we talk about like, oh, moving to Gen 2 and that run state, and talking to you guys, and we go, oh, well, it wasn't really a conscious effort. It was, again, having that end goal in mind and moving toward it, and having that solid foundation to build on as we iterated. But that being said, like for us, what's next? We're looking at global expansion, and I'm so excited about it. So we know, for instance, with the EMEA region, we're in the US currently, but within the EMEA region, it has a more mature direct sourcing model. And so we're looking to launch into 2 countries coming up shortly. And so that's been a big lift when it comes to, getting legal involved and all the contracts in place, because it's a pretty significant lift when it comes to local labor laws and outside counsel. But we did identify it as an area with the largest ROI for us. Some of the other things that we're doing is we're getting more ingrained with large scale projects. So as we were building our curation, as we were building and working toward, if a rec comes in and it's got, anywhere from 30 to 300 headcount, who knows, right? Being able to show those sponsors who may already have a plan in mind of how they want to engage suppliers, being able to show them what our results are from the past have really gotten them to buy in and say, you know what, there's no reason that we shouldn't be using direct sourcing as a channel. So even though we don't go out and evangelize that program because it's built into our processes, when it comes to some of those more strategic conversations like large scale project engagement, we then can go back to the data, engage those business partners, and we have had a lot of success with them saying, you guys are doing it faster, we're saving more money, let's absolutely channel it all into direct sourcing. So that's been really key for us. AI, we talked about that as far as our process for bringing on AI with our responsible AI. It's been several months in the making, but I think we're at the finish line now. So within the next month, with TalentNet, you guys working on your ISO, which is amazing. We should be turning on, TalentNet Navigator and a host of your AI features to really help enable or the curation partner to have that at their fingertips. And we're just looking to see like what those returns will be. So we're excited about that. We've got referral campaigns teed up for what's next. So targeting some of our more niche roles and beyond, and just making sure that as we target, known populations of talent, that we're aligning it to our program scalability, right? So we don't want to go after talent that's, not within our remit or just, is more, doesn't align with the volume or scale that we may have with our silver medalist program coming into our program. So we just want to be very strategic about that. But that's definitely one of the things that we're assessing now is how do we bring in additional populations while making it balanced so that everyone has a positive experience. So that's a lot on our roadmap. That's like a whole call by itself, but we're just really excited about it.
Yeah, it is. It's certainly a lot planned, but I think, back to those early days and that foundation you said, and, for folks that are thinking, okay, I've got to go through this early planning, stakeholder alignment, setting the strategy for the program. But certainly that's paying dividends now, because as you look to expand, whether it's regions or some of these specialized large scale projects, you've got that solution now in place. You know that it performs, and you've got reliable data that you can present, across the company. Christen, let's move over to you just in terms of how AGS supports this sort of evolution to Gen 2. So if you can talk about how did curation and the operational strategy adopt to support Gen 2 direct sourcing at Microsoft?
Yeah, I mean, I think you heard all of the things that we're working on from Crystal. It is a robust roadmap. So looking back, at a year plus 9 months, nearing 2 years now of the program being live, we've really had to adapt our response to changing customer goals and changing strategy. So really, very honestly, we've had to drop these preconceived notions about maybe what our customer was looking for originally and any appetite for disruption of the ecosystem. I mentioned it before, but a really strong partnership and program governance are critical. So ensuring that all teams have visibility to the program goals and are included in part of outlining the approach to those goals. And then further, everyone's held accountable for the results. So our stakeholder relationship, specifically with Crystal, and our ability to collaborate and say, okay, this is the next incremental lever. Let's look at data-driven decisions and which ones are the right ones to activate, changing tactics, incorporating feedback. This has all allowed us to be agile and grow and adapt to that changing strategy.
That's great. And I'll just chime in here, as Crystal mentioned, AI and talking about sort of technology enablement here. So this is really critical too, that is, at TalentNet, as we think about this scale and the plans, and we think about, the operational solution that AGS has put into place, we really need to think about how we can contribute to that scale and that performance. So whether that's, enabling different AI features like our conversational recruitment agent that we refer to as Talent Navigator, or, AI-based job description optimizations, or even AI aided interview assistance. And then we have sort of the added complexity of ensuring that these features can work around the world, right? There's obviously a complicated regulatory and legislative framework that you're working through as well. So all of this has to be looked at in terms of where we're going live in what regions, but ultimately with the goal of increasing the value of human to human connection. So when it comes to AGS and the connections that they obviously have with the talent pool, we really feel it's our role to remove some of that administrative and burdensome work, so they can focus on that higher value that higher value work. Christian, what strategies drive the highest engagement and candidate quality?
Yeah, I mean, very specifically, I think the text feature through TalentNet has been very relevant and useful for our talent community. I think you touched on it, but for talent, it's important that we keep humans in the loop. So making sure that they're getting a lot of feedback and this isn't kind of that black hole experience for them. And then for the candidate quality piece, we've found a lot of success in the Microsoft Alumni Association and also through our referrals. So getting referrals from top people, that idea that good people know good people. So that, and then the talent match or candidate matching as well. So we've started with a certain threshold percentage and have increased that over time, which has given us better candidate quality over time. I know that you also touched on the AI capabilities, but that's been important for us. So adopting the tool AI capabilities as they're released, and then staying really close to the TalentNet support team who can keep us informed and prepared for those enhancements before they're ever released.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we continue to evolve the program, one of the benefits we have is feedback from partners, from our customers, and really, building solutions that again are pragmatic and serve what their needs are. Certainly, as we get into these higher scaling, global programs that are being supported. So let's move and just talk about candidates, communities, and engagement. What it takes to build scalable talent communities. So to both of you, how does Gen 2 improve building and maintaining talent communities?
Yeah, I think we've hit on it pretty extensively, but I think for us, it's also about analyzing our process. So identifying failure points or bottlenecks, solving for people points with tools and technology. And like we said, now that the talent community has grown significantly, we're working on managing and engaging that volume more.
And any specific strategies for driving the highest level of engagement and candidate quality across the pool?
Yeah, I think really what we've talked about was that, certain features through TalentNet. So the text feature, feedback, and then candidate quality really in our referrals in the Microsoft alumni community, candidate matching features. So I think it's really about tapping into what the tool has available.
Okay, thanks, Christen. So why don't we move on and talk about some of the early results now and what we're seeing in terms of all of the work that's gone into standing this up, into sort of looking back and moving again to a Gen 2 with data in mind. And let's talk about results and the value of the program today. So Crystal, what metrics or outcomes stood out, be it time to fill, talent quality, cost savings, potentially hiring manager feedback? Can you talk a little bit about some of the early results?
Yeah, I mean, we had great success with, like, for instance, time to fill. We really focus on the time to source piece because that's the part that we can control. But, seeing like 20-30% faster turnaround time and getting, qualified candidates in has been amazing. And it's also helped us to impact our time to fill by pushing our managers, our sponsors to really, be ready to engage and do hard skills assessments or interviews, so that we could get those candidates in faster. So when we know that we've got candidates in our pipeline, we're able to say, hey, today's Monday. Are you ready to interview on Thursday? Versus kind of, getting more of a lackadaisical feedback from the sponsors and seeing when they can. So that's been huge. Scaling of larger projects, like we talked about, just having that ROI has been, phenomenal. That really stood out for us because we're seeing, a great reduction in time to fill because we're able to get, cohorts of candidates in front of these larger projects quickly and getting the managers to engage faster. So that's been great. We can't talk enough about our cost savings. Like I said, we've exceeded our goals quarter over quarter, and just seeing the team fully engaged and pushing down our rates and our rate max has just been, it's been great. And then probably one of the last things I'll mention is our interview to hire ratios. That was kind of unexpected. We were thinking like, oh, 1 to 3, 1 to 2, but in some cases, with especially some of these projects, I mean, our interview to hire is just it's off the charts with just the quality of the candidates that are going through that are getting engaged and hired on. So that's been great. And I mean, our program, just to pat ourselves on the back here for all of our hard work across our different partners. We won internal awards here at Microsoft, through procurement for impact and innovation, just from what we're able to see and bring to the table with this program. So it's been all great things.
Those are pretty amazing, amazing results. I mean, a 30% reduction in time to fill, the savings you spoke to, an interview to hire, being able to deploy resources more quickly to projects, and congratulations on the award. That's incredible. Christen, how did your curation MSP management impact program outcomes and talent engagement?
Yeah. I mean, we started with a really strong foundation. We, have had a program office in place for a long period of time. We have experienced and knowledgeable program office team that's very embedded into the Microsoft ecosystem and culture. Our relationship with our Microsoft stakeholders is very strong. So I think we were able to extend that structure to the direct sourcing curation team, again, largely through program governance and really our knowledge sharing and the feedback loops. And we've created levels of connectivity and commitment across all teams and all roles, really. As far as impact, I think we talked about it earlier, Crystal, talking about our goals. We've created goals, we've met the goals, then we exceed them, we recreate them. So that's really we're able to reflect kind of where we are in our evolution through those. And of course, the bill rate management, the cost savings is huge to our customers, but some of our biggest wins and positive outcomes have been around the candidate experience. So positioning Microsoft as an assignment of choice and putting the search and the search experience into the hands of the candidates.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Kristen. Like we talk, we focus a lot on sort of these hard KPIs, so to speak, right? And often we have sort of a procurement mind in doing that. But I think it's a great point to think about the talent and the candidate experience here. And as you say, putting the search back in their hands, that they have sort of their own self-directed, experience here where they can view roles at Microsoft, search for roles at Microsoft, be recommended roles at Microsoft, and ultimately self opt in to those roles, right? It's a very direct experience, a very transparent experience, and I think that's a good point. So let's move on. Watching time here, and we certainly want to have a moment to get to some questions. So why don't we move on to sort of advice looking forward and offer some words to the audience. So to Crystal, any advice on organizations looking to move into next gen direct sourcing, sort of the evolution that you've moved through?
Yeah, I mean, quickly, it's really just, having your foundation in place, being able to speak your value prop in front of any and every audience that will listen, getting everyone to listen, and just be bold, right? I mean, we are changing weekly, monthly, daily, depending on what we see in our data. And then just push your partners to go with you, push yourself out of your comfort zone. Like, don't be afraid to try something new and analyze the data and, keep telling your own story. But yeah, take everyone on the journey with you and just keep moving.
Certainly. Well, yeah, the best learning happens at the edge of discomfort. So that's well
I like
said.
that.
Is there anything you would do differently in hindsight?
I'm proud to say not really, right? Like we took our time. Like this wasn't an overnight thing. I mean, just the initial build took between myself and other team members about 5 years to get buy-in, right? So, we wanted to design the right program, made sure we had buy-in at every single level so we didn't have to go backwards and ask for it later on down the road. And then we started with the end in mind. Again, I keep talking about how to be a best-in-class direct sourcing program. Do we know what that means exactly? No, but we're still driving driving toward it. And then, we just build our growth with, flexibility for our future state in mind. And so, getting that brand sign off was massive for us. We did it early on. We had the right discussions. Would we have liked to have gone faster? Sure. But, we also wanted to make sure that we had our customer experience, our candidate experience, that no one was negatively impacted. So I think we took all the right steps and the right precautions early on.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, a very pragmatic approach, but one that's now paying off. Kristen, just over to you, just in terms of any tips you can offer in terms of scaling talent communities, optimization as you move through this Gen 2 direct sourcing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, at first, don't try to boil the ocean. So being surgical and scaling responsibly. So start by identifying roles, talent segments that drive the most impact, whether that's through volume, cost, savings, speed, or skill scarcity, and build your direct sourcing strategy around those. And then as you evolve, I think leaning on tools and technology that help you tap into the talent community. Once it grows, it's more about navigating that volume. So don't be afraid to adopt AI and automation to support those processes. And of course, I'd say this even with Crystal not here, but listen to your customer for sure.
Good advice.
Yes, good advice. Okay, so that sort of brings us to the end of our core content here. We do have some questions that have come in from the audience. We can get to those, just being conscious of time here. So let's just go to the first question here. How did you address internal or external resistance to changing staffing strategies? Who wants to jump on that one?
Sure, I'll take it. So for us internally, because we had our mandated program, we didn't really see this as much of a change. It was more of just an addition to our, our already, well-built solution within our program, because we have great staffing partners as part of our strategy that are already in place. And we all know that direct sourcing will never replace a strong supply base. But that being said, when it comes to having an optimized program, part of our contractor services program remit was to make sure that we had the right strategic suppliers in place, the right mix, the right number of suppliers. And so, sometimes that became a little painful when it came to external, questions, but I think that's a decision that all programs need to make when they're, even before they're bringing in direct sourcing, to make sure that it's still a good playing field for those that are not part of direct sourcing, but that it's the right answer for the solution that we have in place.
Yeah, well said. That should absolutely be part of that early planning, proactively, that it's not, a surprise or becomes a hurdle later. Okay, just moving on to another question here. What's the best way to leverage your alumni or internal networks in direct sourcing?
Chris, and I'll take that because I know you guys work with our alumni association closely as well. But it was really just identifying our internal contacts and then showing and sharing the value. So with our alumni network, we have a lot of engagement with them. We have quarterly or biannual meetings with them where we actually showcase and through webinars what the direct sourcing opportunity is. Obviously, this is voluntary registration. It's an opt-in program, and so if it's a fit for our alumni, it's great for them to have that as another channel to re-engage with Microsoft. But yeah, just having the ability to have visibility on the alumni website has been huge for us for driving that awareness of our program. And so keeping that dialogue going, sharing across success stories, because we want to make sure that we do have that feedback loop as well, so that they know that it's not a black hole, we're actually using it, and it's a great opportunity for everyone.
It's almost back, to that talent asset that we spoke about earlier, that there's really an ROI that, in the talent pool, you can think about it as being sort of omni-channel, right? So of course you've got, external job seekers that are coming in that maybe have not worked with Microsoft in the past, but you can also have alumni, known talent, redeployment. So perhaps even an intern program. So really, the strategy should be about fostering that omni-channel approach, and that you're benefiting from sort of all areas. Okay, one more question. We've actually seen this before, so it's interesting. Does direct sourcing work for technology roles, or is it better for generic, simpler roles? So I guess is it tailored for one skill set versus another? Any thoughts there?
Yeah. I mean, if the question is, does it work for technology roles? I'd say the answer is absolutely, it does. For us, it was about the volume and repeatable skill sets, which you can definitely find in technology roles, but there's no restriction, or it's not for, a different type of labor category, or, I think the phrase was simpler type of roles. So this is absolutely a channel that we can use to attract that talent. And it's really what you put into the talent community too, right? So if we have a high volume of technology roles being posted, we're going to attract that type of talent.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Kristen. I mean, on top of that, it comes down to your curation partner, right? And the talent pool. So, being able to say, do you have the right recruiters in place that understand the landscape of IT and technology, and are they able to identify the best candidate that matches with what you're looking for? And so I know we have that in our partner, but just making sure that they're aligned with what your expectations are. I don't see direct sourcing not being a good fit, as long as you have the right expectations in place.
Okay, great. We do have some other questions here we didn't get to, but we're going to get to them. We can follow up following the webinar to the audience and anyone who's interested. I would also encourage anyone in the audience, if you want, reach out to us, myself, to Crystal, to Kristen. We're happy to speak to you if you've got more thoughts or questions on this. Crystal, Kristen, I really want to thank you. I think providing your perspectives, Crystal from Microsoft, and Kristen in terms of providing, the solution support that AGS provides is amazing. So hopefully the audience took something away from this. Yeah. In terms of just the pragmatism and the early sort of foundational planning and strategy that went into place, and what that's led to. Again, Crystal, the collaboration with stakeholders, the alignment, the feedback loop, the sort of agile approach to this, and then iterating as you scale and grow, right? I think is amazing. So we want to thank everyone for joining today. Again, we'll have some follow-up materials that we'll send out to anyone in attendance. And again, if you've got any questions, if you want to connect with us, please do reach out. Thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.